Imagine if the government of your country exiles you for 31 years. 31 years. Your government forbids you to enter into your own country for 31 years. You haven't buried your mother. You haven't buried some of your relatives. 31 years without seeing your homeland that you were born in and that you were raised in. You know, if there's a woman who has really sacrificed a lot in terms of African music is the woman I'm about to speak about right now. And I think that she is the most important African musical artist we have ever seen in the history of African music. Without her, there would be no Burna Boy, Wizkid, all these amapiano stars you are seeing right now, because she took African music to a global stage. Not only that, but she fought for Africans. Today is a special episode, and this episode I'm going to speak about the one and only Miriam, Queen Mother, Mama Africa, Miriam Zenzile Makeba. Peace and blessings, everybody. I go by the name Sensical Sense, and welcome to Does It Make Sense, the show that inspires you to think. Today is a special episode. I am greatly honored to do this episode because this woman is, she's a force to be reckoned with. The most important African musical artist to ever exist. And today we're going to look at things you should know about Mama Africa, Miriam Zenzile Makeba. Number one, Miriam Zenzile Makeba was born on 4th March 1932 in Johannesburg, South Africa. Her father was a coal miner and her mother was a traditional healer, also known as a sangoma. And a sangoma means that she was a traditional healer. And her being a traditional healer really inspired Miriam Makeba, especially in her African energy, her African vibe in her music was greatly inspired by her mother, who was a traditional healer. Number two, she began singing professionally in the 50s with the Cuban Brothers, then with the Manhattan Brothers. Then she formed her own group called the Skylarks, which was one of the most known and one of the most popular bands at that time. Number three, Mama Africa was exiled from her own country, South Africa. So here's the story. Due to her involvement in the film Come Back Africa, where she sang in, she got international fame. And when she was touring in Europe and America, she found out that her mother passed away. And when she tried to come back to South Africa to bury her own mother, she was restricted entry into her own country. In fact, her passport was revoked. She couldn't enter into her own country. She couldn't bury her own mother. And she was restricted for 31 years. 31 years she was restricted from entering her own home country. The apartheid government saw her as a threat because her music and her speakings were so powerful. They were speaking up against the apartheid government, and the apartheid government was scared that the South African people would be empowered by her music, and that they will use that power to fight against the apartheid government, which is one of the reasons why she was restricted entry into her own country. She couldn't enter into her own country until 1990, when Nelson Mandela was released from prison. Can you imagine that? Number four, while in exile, she made a name for herself. She associated herself with people like Harry Belafonte, who mentored her in the industry. She signed a record deal with RCA Victor, and her debut album was called Miriam Makeba, which actually had the hit song, the Click song, which is one of my favorite songs from her. And till this day, her biggest hit is Pata Pata, which was released in 1967. and peaked at number 12 on Billboard. Number 5, Miriam Makeba was more than a singer. She was an activist. In fact, she eloquently and proudly represented Africa in the UN, where she spoke eloquently about the injustices, the unfairness, the inhumanity that was happening in her own country, South Africa. And her love for African freedom, her love for Pan-Africanism, her love for Africans, and particularly her love for South Africans, really made her to be respected in Africa, especially amongst African leaders. In fact, Sekou Ture was one of her biggest supporters. She really liked Sekou Ture. Sekou Ture really respected her. Even Jomo Kenyatta really respected her. Mwalimu Nyerere from Tanzania really respected her. Leopold Senghor. African leaders really respected her, not only for her singing, not only for her creativity in music, but also for her love for African freedom. And her willingness and her fearlessness to speak up against injustices in South Africa through her music, and using her influence to shed light on what was happening during apartheid. Hey man, that really inspires me. That one really inspires me. And as an African artist, she is actually the main inspirations of me talking about the racism and talking about African freedom in my music. These are the people who I really respect. What happened to musicians speaking up against injustices, speaking up against white supremacy, speaking up against racism? What happened? And that's why I really respect her, because she used her influence, she used her fame, she used her image to shed light on what's happening in South Africa. And so for that, I really thank Mama Africa for that. Thank you, Miriam Makeba, for doing that. Thank you. It really means a lot. Number 6, she married Pan-Africanist and civil rights legend Stokely Carmichael Kwame Ture. And but after her marriage, the music industry blackballed her. They basically cancelled her. Due to her association with Stokely Carmichael Kwame Ture, her music was boycotted. Radio stations could not play her music, and venues, some venues could not accommodate her performing. You need to understand one thing about Stokely Carmichael Kwame Ture. Kwame Ture was in-your-face type of guy. He was a no-nonsense Pan-African. He was going straight at you. He wasn't missing, and he wasn't sparing anyone. He was so powerful in his speakings when it comes to Pan-Africanism. And of course, white people didn't like him. He wasn't liked amongst the white community, and Miriam Makeba's association with him really affected her music, because her music was boycotted in radios, and venues could not accommodate her performings.
There is a boycott on my records on the part of radio stations, but I don't think I'll ever lose my popularity with the people.
Why this boycott?
I don't know. They all give different reasons.
Is that because of your marriage to Dr. Carmichael?
Mostly, yes.
But thanks to Sekou Ture, they made a home for the couple, and Miriam Makeba basically relocated to Guinea, and that's where that was her second home. She called Guinea her second home, thanks to Sekou Ture. Number 7, Miriam Zenzile Makeba had one daughter called Bongi Makeba. And Bongi was the one who was supposed to take over from her mother. She was so talented in terms of vocalism. She was so talented in terms of songwriting. And in fact, like when it comes to songwriting, she wrote a lot of hits for her mother, including one called Aluta Continua, which is one of Miriam Makeba's greatest hits. And Aluta Continua is a song talking about Mozambique's struggle for freedom. She was super talented, and everybody knew that she was the one to take over from her mother. She was the only daughter, the only child actually for Miriam Makeba. But sadly, she passed away at the age of 34. And, it's always really tragic, really sad for a mother to bury her own child. And this one really affected her mental health. And this one really affected her emotional health as well. It's a very, very down moment in Miriam Makeba's life, losing her own child. Number 8, Mama Africa died in Italy, 9th November 2008, after suffering a heart attack. She transitioned in Italy. I think that Miriam Makeba is the greatest African artist to ever exist. I think Miriam Makeba is the most important African artist to ever exist because of her work that she did outside music. She'll be remembered not only for her songwriting skills, her talented vocals. She'll not only be remembered for her really empowering presence, but she'll be remembered for her work that she did outside music, which is fighting for South Africans, which is shedding light on what was happening during apartheid South Africa, shedding light on the inhumanity that was happening in South Africa, shedding light on the injustice that was happening in apartheid South Africa. For that, I'll forever respect her. And so, whenever you're listening to Afrobeats, amapiano, all these global stars, whenever you're listening to Burna Boy, to Wizkid, whenever you're listening to any African global star, whenever you're listening to them, you just know that it's because of Miriam Makeba that they're enjoying the success they're having now. Because if it wasn't for Miriam Makeba taking African music to the global stage, these guys wouldn't be there. She paved the way. And so for that, I would like to say thank you, Mama Africa. So whenever you're listening to Burna Boy, whenever you're listening to Wizkid, whenever you're listening to any Afro global music, you just know one thing, that it's because of Miriam Makeba that these stars are having the careers they're having now. And when you're listening to those music, just say these 4 words. Thank you, Mama Africa. Just say those 4 words. When you are listening to Burna Boy, just say, thank you, Mama Africa. And so, thank you for watching. Remember, less is more, and please think before it becomes illegal. And I would like to end the episode by saying, thank you, Mama Africa. Thank you.